here's the bigger thing. Right now, everyone's bickering about, people are just, I don't know what you've seen so far, but I've seen on social media just so many people where they're just like, I'm with Biden and Harris, and if you're not, you're a moron and you're an asshole and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, wow, that's really, you should go door to door with that. That's going to win over
what a great message,
all these moderate Republicans are going to love that. All these moderate Republicans you claim exist and we're trying to get, you're going to win them all with that. Like, who are you voting for? I'm undecided. Well, that's because you're a fucking moron. Here's some literature. Fuck you. Like, it's like,
and a lot of these folks who are vocal online too live in, the quote unquote safe states. So it's like, why are you so worried about a couple of people in California and New York who are saying that they're not going to vote Democrat when those seem to be a shoo-in? Well, shouldn't you be focused on phone banking, getting out the vote in like Pennsylvania, Michigan? Seems like Texas is a toss-up. Like, and what a great message if you're going the door to door with that one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Like, let me ask you if your memory is the same as mine in this. Do you remember, like, before 2016, it was actually among people who were on the left, who, wanted true systemic change and wanted to strategically get there and realized that, neither party was really their friend. It was smiled upon if you lived in a quote unquote safe state, or the better way to put it is just a decided state where you voted against the oligarchy. Like, I remember that used to be smiled upon. Like, you would talk to people and it wasn't an uncommon conversation where someone would be like, well, I'm voting for Obama because I live in a swing state. And then the other person would be like, oh, I'm voting third party because I live in New York. Like, that used to be smiled upon. And then from 2016 until now, all of a sudden, people forget about the Electoral College until it's convenient for them to remember it. and now it's like your public enemy number one when you talk about that stuff.
Yeah. I obviously they know something that isn't expressed publicly in the media if they're so worried about people in safe states not voting blue. That's I think the main takeaway. I mean, what's the name of that map? It's the United States of Apathy. If you ever Google that, there's a map that just shows if no one was a candidate, all the counties across the nation that they would have won. And it's like, you look at California and only the Bay Area is blue. The rest of the state is just gray. No one would have won. If staying home meant nobody won, no one would have won California. And like same with Texas is like Arizona was completely gray. Like a lot of this country just doesn't give a shit because the two parties don't offer anything worth caring about.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. It's like, you're trying to, it's always, well, let's try to appeal to the moderate Republicans. Let's try to appeal to this. Let's try to appeal to that. How about we try to appeal to half the country that stays home? How about we try to appeal to them? And how about instead of wagging your finger at somebody who didn't vote the way you feel that they should have voted, how about trying to appeal to the people that stay home by, offering them something?
Yeah.
Crazy sentiment. But here's the thing. Here's the big thing that's looming right now amidst all of this. People's City Council of Los Angeles tweeted this. Here's what's going to go on come the end of September. 300K in Los Angeles are going to lose their homes. 1 million in California. 40 million nationwide. They're all at risk of being evicted in the coming month. And the tweet goes on to say, this is not the kind of system we want to live under. This falls on all elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels. Utter disregard for humanity. And I'll give this message right now, to the people who, that they're for Biden and Harris. They want to see Trump out of office, which, I get wanting Trump out of. I don't want to see Trump be president any longer. It's disgusting. Unfortunately, I just don't want to see the other group be president either. So it's a loss no matter what. It's just a different. It's just a different type of loss, and you just got to plan for the loss. But I'll tell you what: if you plan on voting for Biden, this right here should be a huge concern of yours, because with the pandemic, there's going to be a lot of voting by mail going on, which, and if a bunch of people lose their homes because nothing's done about it, Trump is for sure going to win again. That goes without saying. And that's just like an objective electoral observation. So, all these people who are, telling everybody who's not for Biden Harris to go screw themselves and is wagging their finger at people to the left and people to the right. Instead of doing that, maybe try to do something about this, because if this happens, your dude is for sure going to lose.
Yeah, that's an angle no one really seems to care about, right? Like I saw a tweet the other day of someone saying they ended a long-term relationship, and now when they moved away, they don't have enough time to change their voter registration, so how are they going to vote by mail? And that ballot goes to their ex's place. And it's like there's edge cases like that the system doesn't account for. And I mean, 40 million people losing their homes, that's a lot of ballots that aren't going to get sent to the right place. And a lot of people that probably are going to do something other than vote to try and change things at that point. I would be a little scared if I was a landlord at that point. Gun sales went way through the roof this year for a lot of different reasons. And it seems really stupid to me that Congress has not acted on this sooner.
It's beyond.
My God.
I mean, it is so ridiculous the way this entire pandemic has been handled, where they're giving it all to the banks. They're just ignoring the people. I mean, I don't know. I mean, although with my 1,200, I did buy a yacht and a condo. I don't know what you did with yours, but I did. I mean, I'm still swimming and all that. But eventually, that $1,200 we got 5 months ago, that's going to dry up eventually. Crazy thought, but it's unreal. And now that they're not doing anything about the upcoming housing crisis. We'll see what happens. Hopefully something is done and people try to stay in their homes. Trump mentioned it in his executive order, but really all he actually called for was just, he recommended it. He was like, hey, HUD, maybe this is bad. And maybe the health people will be like, hey, if a bunch of people are homeless, it might be bad for COVID. Maybe you should act on that. That's essentially what was in there. So really, at the end of September, potentially 40 million people around the country going to lose their homes.
Yeah, it's a depressing thought. It's also, I feel bad for NIMBY folks because they're going to be having heart attacks too. No, I don't really feel bad for them, but here in California, that's going to be a mess. We don't have the infrastructure to take care of the homeless population right now. And the best infrastructure for that would be to give them homes, right? So going backwards isn't going to help.
Well, even there were all those movements to try to make that happen, like the no vacancy. There was the no vacancy movement throughout all of California, where they were urging, homeless people to get hotel rooms and stuff like that. And, there was a little of that happened in California throughout the state. A little of it happened here in LA, but it was nowhere near enough. It was just numerically, they just didn't do enough. And then they pretty much just stopped. And now it's just, the freight train's coming. This entire thing, it's you look at the pandemic and the upcoming climate catastrophe and the upcoming, what we're going to be faced with economically as a result of all this. And it's sort of if someone asked me, just what does the current situation feel like to you? To me, it's almost it's we're standing at the bottom of a hill and there's this big freaking forest fire, dude. And it is coming at us full force, and it's going, and we're we got to figure something out. We got to move soon. That fire's coming right at us. It's taking up everything in its wake. And someone else comes up to us and they have their hands out, and in one hand is a cup of warm water in one of those Dixie cups you get at a gas station. So just a little cup of water. And then in their other hand is a twig, and they go, pick the lesser evil. And you're like, I feel like we need an entirely different solution. I feel I don't know what that's going to pick the lesser evil, or this is all your fault. Yeah. You know what? You have fun with this. I'm going to go try to figure out a real solution to all this. Cause that fire is coming right freaking for us. And, the longer term solution I see is kind of fixing this place one community at a time. Yesterday I had on Sarah for Portland, who's running for Portland mayor. And it's she has a plan to kind of get them out of this thing. And that's what you need. You need people being active in their communities, whether it's running for office, whether it's being an activist, whether it's like just getting involved in a community initiative, and just slowly rebuilding this place one community at a time.
That's where it's so damaging that the social media tools that we have now are so rigidly controlled. Because for the longest time, people have been able to check out of local politics because it's harder to pay attention to than just tuning into TV. And then there was like a brief period where you could open up YouTube and find alternative opinions real easy. And suddenly the adpocalypse happened, and now we're kind of back to square one almost. And you see that replicated in like all these fact checkers mediating conversations on Twitter only in one direction. Labeling like RT a media source, like a state-sponsored media source, but not Radio Free Europe for like pretty arbitrary reasons, things like that. It's just, all of that impacts our ability to get information that's not in line with mainstream narratives. And a lot of times that includes local candidates that are offering alternative viewpoints, because like there's not really local papers everywhere anymore. Right. And the ones that exist are getting bought out and cover like vanity stories.
Or they're just like, they're just online and nobody even knows that they exist really. And it's tough, man. And, it's really interesting too, like how we're taught about voting, where it's like, we are taught like our priorities are just completely opposite of what they should be as far as how you're going to use a vote. Like we're taught whenever somebody says, well, if you didn't vote, you have no right to complain. Like we've all heard that cliche in our lives, which I disagree with anyway. But even that sentiment itself is totally backwards because they're always referring to presidential when they say that. It's not like it's like, well, if you didn't vote, you have no right to complain. Really? Yeah, that's right. Who did you vote for school board? They're not referring to that. They're referring to president. That's all they mean. And it's the total opposite of where our priorities should be. Like it should be voting locally should be the first thing you're taught to do. It should be the first vote that you cast. And you should just be taught how freaking important it is. I'm not going to say that corruption can't happen on the local level. Of course it can, and it does. But there's just so much more transparency and accountability because it's your freaking neighborhood. Yeah. And when you compare that to what goes on at the state and federal level, it really is. It's significantly different. And there's a lot more you can do when you just start right in your backyard.
Yeah, there's people would argue, and I'm kind of in agreement with this, that we ought to focus on both fronts, right?
Sure.
So that's sort of the approach that I take, and that's also why I've been involved with like the campaign at the presidential level. But absolutely, folks need to pay attention at the local level because the presidential elections turn into a pageant for a reason, because we all end up focusing on that through all the debate season. And then we get to the voting booth, and all the research we've done is we've looked at the party lines of these local candidates usually. And I admittedly, I've tried to get better about this myself, but I still do a pretty shitty job about keeping up on local elections. So I'm trying to do that research myself. And a lot of folks should just be honest about that and try and get a little more involved. You'll be surprised at how many races folks run unopposed, and it's just like stupid. Totally. A lot of local sheriffs, things like that.
Yeah. And it makes a difference. And don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of it too. Every time I get a ballot, I'm not
like, totally who are these folks?
Right. Totally. And I think like that's inevitable, but I think it's like, when a like-minded person who's an activist in the community is running for city council, it's like, try to get hip to that stuff. And I'd like to see more people do it. Like, I'd like to see more people try to run for city council, try to run for mayor, and really think about just mobilizing one community at a time. And it doesn't just have to be around electoral politics. It can be around, activism and movements too.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make